Week 8. Dave Loughran, Ben Rasa, and the number 1 ranked DFS player in the world, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Fellas, it's a big day. How we doing?
Good. It's cold and rainy here, but other than that, it's a good day. Excited for this slate. I actually really like it, not going to lie.
So do I, which means things won't go well.
Correct.
What's up, Alex?
What's up? Yeah, we got some great DFS weather today. Maybe not so great for actual football, but for sitting inside and making some lineups, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's miserable where I'm at right now.
Yeah, same here.
I just ran out to the beer store because I got some friends coming over during the game, and I should have looked at when it opened. So didn't get any beer. But here we are. We're back in time, and we're ready to talk some football. Let's jump right into it. 12 games. Alex, starting with Atlanta and Seattle. Matt Ryan was ruled out yesterday. By the way, if you have SiriusXM, check out Awesemo Radio on Saturday, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. Manny, Laura, and I break all of this down heading into the week. And check out tonight's show, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Awesemo Fantasy Football Game Day, recapping everything, best, worst plays, everything through the week. And, of course, On the Contrary. Now, you guys did On the Contrary on Friday, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, On the Contrary, Chris Baggs, Alex Baker, and a special guest every week. And then, of course, you got the deep dive now. So here we go. Matt Ryan ruled out yesterday, which means we've got Matt Schaub, that, the pick six king, going up against Russell Wilson and a really solid Seattle offense. Let's start with Atlanta here. Just let me get your take first on how this changes things, Alex. Obviously, it changes things a lot, but how much and what type of adjustments do you make? The total went from 54 down to 50. Falcons still have an implied total above 20. It's at 21.3. Seattle at 28.8, one of the highest on the slate, and they're 7.5-point road favorites. So let's dig into Atlanta first here, especially knowing that they just traded Mohamed Sanu away to the Patriots earlier this week.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of interesting because we got a really good passing offense, except now we got Matt Schaub under quarterback. So I think that it'll be a good test of whether quarterbacks matter. But
yeah,
actually, I mean, usually when you have a bad quarterback come in, they're throwing to guys that aren't that good. But that's not true in this case because he's got Julio, he's got Austin Hooper, Calvin Ridley, and they're all bolstered a little bit by the fact that Sanu got traded. So I think that it kind of hurts. I mean, I guess it's kind of a wash for those guys because it's the worst quarterback but more opportunity. And Matt Schaub is incredibly cheap. He's basically the minimum price across the industry. So I'd be interested in taking some shots on this passing attack.
Ben, what about you for Atlanta here? In a game where anything can happen, we've seen scripts flip entirely too much in the NFL, particularly this season. But what about you in a game where they are very likely to be playing from behind at least?
It's a tricky spot because, as Alex just mentioned, normally, you get a backup quarterback. He has no weapons, and it's a disaster. But this is a situation. I mean, Schaub has everything you could ask for around him. Now, they're 8-point home dogs, but at the same time, it should open up targets. Ridley and Julio, Sanu not there anymore. Maybe we see some of them. I do think, of course, the floors are impacted just because there is a real chance that this offense just stalls and it's ineffective without Ryan back there. So I think you can work them into lineups. I'm not paying down for Schaub. I'll get that right out of the way. I don't think that's necessary on the slate. So it's more one-offs, if anything, from Atlanta for me. Okay.
Yeah. What about Devonta Freeman? You could make the two arguments here. One, that they're going to try, I refuse to use the term establish the run, but at least try and get him more involved and, potentially even as somebody, as an extension of the run in the short pass game, because he is a decent pass catcher, knowing that Matt Schaub probably isn't going to be airing it out. But on the other hand, the game just gets away from him and Devonta Freeman gets phased out by the second quarter. Where do you see that shaking out, Ben?
Yeah, I think that's really what we're kind of trying to break down. For the Falcons, if they can hang in it, he should get the volume. Maybe he gets an uptick in targets just because, they want to get Schaub some easier looks and not push it down the field. But at the same time, if the script goes wrong and he is somewhat phased out, it's just a little tougher, I think, for the Falcons to get there in more scenarios just because they have a more narrow path with Schaub. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's still a home game indoors, which becomes more pertinent. We all talked about how shitty it is out there on the East Coast. So I don't mind looking to the game. I just think you have to be careful with thinking that this Falcons offense is not impacted.
Yeah, Alex, what are your thoughts on Freeman? I don't want to spend too much time here, but Matt Ryan being out, it's a big piece. And I want to make sure we hit on everything, including Freeman.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we got Ito Smith out, so he's backed up by Brian Hill currently. I expect him to get a little bit more of the workload given the situation. Not a huge amount more, but Freeman is pretty cheap across the industry. 10.4K on fantasy draft, 6,200 on FanDuel. So I think he's priced pretty well, and he makes a nice value play.
Okay. What about the other side? I mean, Seattle, like I said, one of the highest implied totals here. I think rightfully so. The only teams with higher totals right now would be the Saints, would be the Rams, and that's it on this slate. Pittsburgh, of course, against Miami, but that's a night game. What do you make of Wilson and the passing game? I want to get to Chris Carson and spend some time there, of course. But let's start with Wilson. Let's start with his weapons here with the aerial attack, who have been pretty solid this season. Wilson, arguably been the best quarterback in the league through 7 games.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's been on fire, and it makes sense to target some of the pass catchers here because Atlanta's defense is pretty weak. I think that going to Tyler Lockett is a sensible play, and he's probably going to be one of the more popular wide receivers today. He's having a terrific season. And the fact that Will Dissly is injured and they're replacing him with a lower volume tight end should open up a few more targets than these guys have been seeing originally. And also kind of DK Metcalf is starting to be on my radar for that reason.
Okay. What about you, Ben?
Lockett's such a tough guy because you look, his price is pretty premium, I think. And then you look at the targets and you're like, there's no way this guy can get there with this type of volume. But then you look at the efficiency and he makes the most of, middling targets and he can get there. So it is a little difficult. I still err on the side that his ceiling more often than not is he needs to run extremely pure with touchdowns. He just doesn't get the work. And with the Seahawks having a lot of ways to kind of move the ball in this one, you mentioned Metcalf, Carson, of course. I think for me, if I go there, I'd rather take a shot with Metcalf. I think the big game is certainly in the cards. Eventually, will it be this week? I don't know, but he has a lot more room based on the salary.
I said this about Lockett coming into the season, Ben, that I just didn't see any way he was going to average a touchdown per every 7 receptions. And granted, it's not like but he had 10 touchdowns on 57 receptions. So forgive me, that was a touchdown on every 5.7 receptions on every 7 targets. This year he has 40 receptions and 4 touchdowns. So you're starting to see it balance out a bit, but he's still been efficient. He's still breaking off big plays. But the problem is he doesn't have the volume of an elite receiver. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Absolutely. It's not to say that he cannot get there. We've seen him get there time and time again, honestly. The difference is that if a couple of things go wrong, if the game script, the impact is so much more severe to a guy who's getting only, for where he's priced, he's towards the bottom in terms of expected targets. So I think that's something you have to consider when you're comparing where to allocate that salary at wide receiver.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there. If you're someone that, wants this game but doesn't want to go to the more popular options, it's certainly risky. But Jaron Brown has actually been very involved recently. He has 4 red zone targets over his last 2 games alone. His snap counts, we've seen them climb from 31 to 54 to 60%. Earlier in the season, he was getting more, but 60% of snaps last week. And his target counts, he's had 11 over his last 2 games. So, there's reason to think that he could actually be one of these peripheral guys that no one looks at, who's very cheap and ends up getting in the end zone with, 70 yards or so and takes away from Lockett and DK Metcalf. So especially knowing that Will Dissly's out and they don't really have that strong tight end game, I think, you might look to Wilson targeting a third receiver more often than he did before. What are your thoughts on Chris Carson, Alex?
I like him. I think that this game script probably will set up really favorably for running the ball a lot of times, which is what Seattle loves to do. And they've shown, even with Rashad Penny back, that Carson's going to get 20-plus runs a game if they're running the ball that many times. So I think that adds up to a lot of fantasy value.
Yeah, Ben, Carson is a 20-plus touch per game guy from what we've seen. He doesn't have a game with fewer than 15 carries, but he's got 21 or more carries in 4 straight starts, getting up around 4 targets in the passing game as well. How much do you like him, if at all, today?
Yeah, certainly have to consider him. It looks like the fumbles are maybe behind him, and even so, he never really fell off in terms of volume. So in a game that, like I said, they are favorite, and it looks like, you look at last week, that was really the first time where he really didn't make a huge impact. He didn't find the end zone, but he has so many ways to contribute just on pure volume. You get a handful of catches, 20-plus carries. You can get there just on that. Certainly, he can make the most of a bad Atlanta defense in terms of finding the end zone. You combine those two things, that's going to be the game you're looking for if you target him. And the salary with, we'll get there, but McCaffrey, Saquon, these guys aren't in elite spots, in my opinion. They're playable, of course, but I think these type of backs are really towards the top of the list in terms of optimal spots to target. Anyone
else here, Ben, for you in this game?
Not really, honestly. I think that if you want to be very different and you think that Schaub really struggles and they get to him, you could look to Seattle's defense. But again, that's more often than not, you could say that about a lot of teams. So not a ton else to add.
And for you, Alex, where would this game rank in terms of priorities as a game stack for you?
I think the Seattle side is pretty appealing with Lockett and Carson. And then Atlanta is a little bit tougher to get to unless you are stacking. Aside from Devonta Freeman, who might be on my radar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're running it back, you have Wilson and a bunch of pass catchers. Who would you run it back with? Would it be Freeman mostly?
Essentially, yeah, that would be my strategy. If I'm playing Wilson, I'm hoping Atlanta puts up points, and the best price player is Freeman.
Okay. Ben, let's go to you, Buffalo and Philly. By the way, we're going to spend additional time on games that warrant it because some of these we're not going to spend a ton of time on. Buffalo, Philadelphia being one of them. Ben, no surprise here. Low total in this game. 2 offenses that have struggled. The Eagles, the amount of injuries to this team right now is like unfathomable. They have a sub 20-point total, 2.5 point dogs on the road. Buffalo 21.8 total, 41 over under. It's the second lowest on the week overall, ahead of only the Jets and Jaguars. So that should tell you something. Also, I know we don't pay a ton of attention to weather, but I will mention that the wind in this game was supposed to be getting 25-mile-per-hour gusts, sustained up around 20 miles per hour. So you don't need to factor that in, but if you're someone that pays attention to that, it's definitely going to be windy in Buffalo. How are you approaching this game between the Eagles and Bills?
Bad game, yeah. You said it, and if you watch the college football games from yesterday, if they got that cell, which is probably moving across, it was an impact.
Was it?
Absolutely. I mean, the Michigan game last night was sloppy. Ohio State earlier, but that's neither here nor there. This is a game that, it's a really interesting situation because you've got the Bills who, lofty record. I don't know how good they are going against an Eagles secondary that we know can be exploited, but at the same time, a front seven that it's really going to have to fall to Josh Allen. And if the wind is up, I thought the best place to really target would be Jaron Brown, maybe over the top. And that, if there was one place to really impact in terms of weather, that would probably be it. So I don't have a ton of interest. I think you can get away from this game without being burned too often. And with, only a couple teams on the bye, we have plenty of options. So not a ton for me. I guess I'll just quickly say for the Eagles, I still think Zach Ertz with the price drop is someone you can look to. I know Goddard has taken some of the targets, but I think that's going to regress in a positive way for a guy like Ertz shortly. So I did look to him in some spots.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Plus, tight end, not particularly deep today. The couple guys I like, but it's not super deep. I'd say too, with Allen and John Brown, I'll still have a little bit of that. I think it makes sense to, dip your feet in, but not really dive head first into Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills offense, particularly because you're really just looking at pairing him with one guy. I don't know if you're getting two receivers. Like Cole Beasley's upside really isn't much. Here's what I would say, Alex. This game, unless you really want to be different and think it makes a ton of sense to go here, for me, I just don't see myself getting to much on a day where we've got a ton of other options.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this one isn't too appealing for fantasy purposes, especially the Bills side. But I agree with you guys that Ertz is a nice play. It's not your typical two tight end situation where only one's on the field running a route at a time. I mean, they're both running routes on a lot of plays, and that means that Goddard isn't really taking away from Ertz that much.
Okay. I mean, is that all you have from this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the Bears and Chargers.
God.
Stay with you, Alex. What was that, Ben?
This is another bad game. Go ahead.
Yeah. Another game with a 41 over-under, actually, tied with the Eagles and Bills. Bears 22.3 implied total, 18.8 for the Chargers. Dude, I'll tell you what. Here's another one where we need to at least talk about the Bears' defensive struggles and meltdowns over the past couple of games. They've dealt with injuries to that defense, and it's certainly impacted them. They've allowed their rushing totals they allowed over the first 4 games. Now, they've had a bye week. Over the first 4 games, 47, 90, 69, and 40. Over the last 2 games, 169 and 151. They're allowing 413 combined yards per game on average over their last 2. Do you think that holds up today, or do the Bears at Soldier Field against the Chargers team that's traveling from the West Coast, do they fix these issues, start getting turnovers, start getting sacks, of which, again, they had 17 sacks over their first 4 games, Alex. They have 1 sack over their last 2. You're a Chicago guy. What do you see here?
Yeah, I think the Bears defense is not really what I'm targeting that much because, I mean, the Chargers just aren't that bad. Usually I'm looking for a team facing a quarterback that really struggles, and Philip Rivers is solid enough. Actually, I'm interested in a lot of the Chargers offensive players here today, but the Bears are kind of the bottom of my list of offensive potential.
Okay. I mean, Mitch Trubisky's looked really bad, Alex, and there were a couple of RPOs. I saw on Twitter some awesome breakdowns on these RPOs where, like, he had players wide open and instead let the guy come off the edge and trounce him for a 15-yard loss instead of quickly finding the open man. I'm not doing it justice. You'd have to go and look. But, man, he has really struggled this season. And Allen Robinson has still managed to piece together solid numbers because he's really good. But it's just been a real struggle for this offense with Mitch Trubisky just not leading the charge at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's stunk. I mean, average yards per attempt under 6. That's not going to do it for fantasy. And Allen Robinson is pretty expensive. I mean, I know there's some talent there, and last year he had some explosive performances, but I don't think that's very likely.
Ben, quickly, and then I'll go to the Chargers. Do you have anything you like from the Bears today?
I think Allen Robinson's still playable just because he's getting – we talked about Lockett. He's the opposite. He's getting double-digit targets, it seems like, in any game script, making the most of games where Trubisky's awful. And, I mean, he has been awful, but at the same time – and now I know he salvaged it with garbage time last week. It still looks that, you know, there's more ways to get there in this Bears offense than you would think with a guy like Robinson. Other than that, though, I don't know how you back either of the running backs. And Trubisky, I'm not going there.
Okay. What about the Chargers? Anthony Lynn, I think, finally acknowledged that Austin Eckler needs to be involved heavily, really in all phases of the game, or of the offense, sorry. On the ground, of course, he didn't do much at all last week. Neither did Melvin Gordon. But Eckler's impact in the passing game is way, way too important to pass up. Only 4 targets against Pittsburgh. He had previously seen 16, and then he saw 8 last week. But what do you think, Ben, is going wrong for a Chargers team that has dropped games to, at the time, the winless Denver Broncos? Almost said Nuggets, man. I struggle with this sport crossover. A Pittsburgh team that I think had only won 1 game, and that was against Cincinnati. And then against Tennessee, I get that they fumbled that away at the goal line, but what is the issue here? Do you think getting Okung back is going to help them keep Phillip Rivers upright?
Well, better. Yeah, welcome back, Melvin Gordon. He's contributed to 0 wins so far. They need to figure it out fast because they're on life support. And, Keenan Allen is someone that I haven't seen confirmation, but it looks like he may not play. That'd be a big loss for this team.
I don't think he practiced all week, right?
Yeah, it looks – what is it? Yeah, hamstring. So that is worrisome. Now we know they have some other guys. They've got Williams, Hunter Henry, and they do have the dynamic backs, but it's a team that seems to have no identity, week to week. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they do. The defense certainly has not been what I thought it would be. I don't know if that's all Derwin James. I mean, how good – I know he's a good player, but the pass rush has been mitigated somewhat. They just need to find something. So I think you can look to them, but I have a tough time really nailing down an individual play for the Chargers. To me, they're one of the teams, if I go to them, I'll probably just stack them up, run it back with a guy like Robinson. I think that's the more, prudent play if you're attacking it.
Yeah, I think so too. Alex, there's always merit to at least, fully analyzing a game and saying, is there a way that this one shoots out, right? Like, is there a chance that we see this game completely outproduce any of the expectations and soar above the over/under? Do you see? Because you're the perfect guy to ask. You have the top stack tool. I mean, seriously, you have the top stack tools. This is something that you pay close attention to. What is the probability that this is the game or even one of the games?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me pull up my tool here because I do really like the Chargers offense here for DFS because Keenan Allen being doubtful means that there'll just be a lot more targets to go around. And, I mean, we don't see that equal big fantasy production every week, but that certainly gives more opportunity to guys like Hunter Henry, like Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler is someone I'm especially interested in because if you get really lucky, he'll be running routes alongside Melvin Gordon, and that could just make him see the field a lot more than you might expect. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily super likely, but it's something that's kind of in the back of my head. I have the Chargers as about a 3.6% chance of being the top stack today, and Phillip Rivers is pretty low on, so they can make a nice contrarian play.
Okay. And would you run it back with Allen Robinson?
This one I might not run back.
At all.
If I did, actually, David Montgomery, it looks like he's real cheap. And Allen Robinson is super expensive, so I'm a little bit hesitant to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I actually got a decent amount of Montgomery in my initial crunches. Now, this was yesterday, and of course, we didn't have any news on Alvin Kamara with Latavius Murray, so things will change. But because Montgomery's so cheap, I think I initially had like 10%, which scared me, but I don't know. He only saw 2 carries last week. You'd think that Nagy is going to make some adjustments here, right? Like you would think he's got to do something.
I mean, that was super. It was super fluky that they ran the ball twice last week or something. I mean, you can't really take too much away from that.
No, but they are in disarray. I will find out. But yeah, Montgomery's cheap enough to at least give him a look. Ben, how about Detroit, New York Giants? The New York Giants secondary, man. Let me tell you, Arizona really let me down last week. Larry Fitzgerald with the matchup against someone in Grant Haley who's literally been the worst slot corner in the league this year, and it's not even close. He had 1 reception for 12 yards. Nobody did anything outside of Chase Edmunds. Kyler Murray was invisible because they didn't need him. But now you've got Detroit going up against the Giants. They're going in here with a backup running back. Ty Johnson will likely get the first crack at getting the lion's share. I guess we'll find out. You've got Marvin Jones coming off a 4-touchdown game. Ty 10 for 93 and 4 touchdowns against Minnesota, nonetheless. And then, of course, Kenny Golladay, who I really loved Golladay coming into this year. I thought in seasonal leagues he was an excellent value. And he's been very boom or bust, right? He's had 3 really solid games, 1 decent game, and 2 terrible games. What are you thinking about this Detroit team? Let's cover it across the board because we definitely got to talk Ty Johnson, Matt Stafford, all of these guys in the offense.
Yeah, it was and Fitzgerald, he caught that pass about 30 seconds into the game.
It was hard. I mean,
I was like, oh, here we go. Print pass. 4 hours later.
Now this is going to be a Larry Fitz drive. Yeah.
Sick. Anyway, yeah, it's a good spot for the Lions. They are at home. They are a favorite. And we'll have to see what Patricia wants to do with the running back situation. Does he take a carry-on-like workload, or does McKissick spell him enough where it's somewhat of a timeshare? He's cheap enough where, certainly if he can score, it's not going to hurt you. And if he does get a true workhorse and they lean on him to ice this game, if they're winning late, he does make for a cheap running back. Now, with Kamara out, I think some of the ownership will be mitigated and rolled to Murray, and that could help him a bit. But he's still probably one of the more popular cheap end guys. Certainly Kenny Golladay. I mean, I kind of throw last week out as an anomaly. Before that, he's averaged 9 targets, and it's been pretty flat. He's basically getting 9 targets in every single game. I expect that to return very quickly, where Marvin Jones was just on a career game. So I have no problem going to him. I don't think I'm going to get to a ton of Stafford. I have no problem with him. He's just, there are a couple other quarterbacks for me that were ahead of him.
Okay. Excuse me. Let me say it real quick here, because I think I have, as Stafford was my 4th highest owned quarterback as of now. Obviously, things will change, Alex. What about you with this passing game for the Detroit Lions?
Well, first of all, I love the matchup versus the Giants. They've been pretty poor this year, but we're seeing the Lions receivers get really, really high price tags. I mean, we got Kenny Golladay in the 6Ks. So that's a little bit more than I'd like to pay. They do spread the ball around a lot in Detroit with 4 viable guys. So they got Amendola, who had a big week last week, and as well as Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson. So, I mean, even though I project Stafford to do pretty well, when you split it up that many ways, it makes it hard to really love any individual player. Okay.
If you had to, what about the run game? What about Ty Johnson? Any interest here?
I'm definitely interested. I expect him to see. I liked what you did there, the lion's share. That was nice.
Totally unintentional, but thank you. I worked on it.
Very nice.
Yeah. I think that he's just cheap. 4,900 DraftKings, 5,200 FanDuel. Prefer him on FanDuel for that reason. And it's a good spot for the running attack. I mean, they're going to probably run the ball more than normal, being a big favorite versus the Giants. So he makes a nice play.
Ben, what about Ty Johnson for you? Any last thoughts before we flip to the other side of this game?
Certainly, Alex mentioned it. It is worth noting. I think better on FanDuel than DraftKings. But if you think that he's going to get the work that is, applicable to what we saw carry on, and he's going to contribute in both the running and passing attacks, you got to at least consider him at that price tag.
All right. What about the Giants, Ben? Anybody stand out for you here on a day where Sterling Shepard is out? You do have Saquon Barkley, of course, Golden Tate, and Evan Ingram. Also, it's definitely worth noting here that Darius Slay, I believe he is out, right? I think he's already out. Maybe I thought I saw that last night. I just want to make sure, because that's kind of decent news or big news. But let me figure it out while you talk about this Giants team. Did you see it?
I saw something on him, and I
thought Schefter reported it, but now I can't find it.
Darius Slay.
That'd be a shame, because I really want to see this Darius Slayton matchup.
Yeah, I believe him and Mike Daniels, I just saw a blurb that they are both out. Chat can confirm if I'm horribly wrong, but I think you're right, which is certainly a nice boost to some of these Giants weapons. The problem with the Giants right now is that Danny Dimes.
He's out. Sorry, Ben, but he's out per Adam Schefter 11 hours ago.
Okay, so there you go. The Giants offense they had a nice little string with Daniel Jones, and it's to be expected. Now he's hit some turbulence, so it's been a pretty fluid situation. They haven't had any guys in at the same time. Guys are getting hurt while Saquon came back after his absence. I don't love the price tag on any of these guys. I think Barkley is certainly viable in tournaments because he can blow any price tag out, but at the same time, he's pretty premium, and there are guys that we've already mentioned who are cheaper and in better spots. So it's a Giants team I don't have a ton of interest. Evan Ingram's another guy where we saw last week 5 targets, 1 reception. I think you're going to see inefficiency like that if Daniel Jones continues to struggle. So it's hard for me to really pinpoint anyone here. And honestly, I doubt I get a ton of Giants in my lineups.
Okay. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I have to agree. They're not really standing out to me a ton. Detroit is about an average matchup, I'd say, for the offense. And the prices on these guys aren't too good. It is a little site specific because on FanDuel at 8,600, Saquon Barkley makes a nice play. We're on Yahoo at 41. I mean, that's like the highest price I've seen anyone all season, and that's just insane.
All right. So anybody stand out here that you actually do have like even tepid interest in?
I think Barkley because he's one of the highest projected guys on the slate, and every week we see guys go out and put up 40 points, and there's certainly potential for Barkley to have a game like that.
All right, Ben, if you had 50 lineups, how many lineups do you think in some form or fashion, of course, the question we don't know, but how many do you think would have Detroit and New York?
In terms of a stack?
In terms of a stack.
Maybe I'd say 3 to 5, under 10%, not a game I'm really looking to get heavy exposure to.
So it's not your favorite, or it's not your least favorite, but it's also not anywhere near the top. Is the Jacksonville Jaguars and New York Jets game?
Oh yeah, this is my moment now. I'm looking for Blu-ray quality type stacks, and this is not it. So these are 2 teams. I do think, though, talking about this next game, we've got Fournette, and he was someone I was alluding to with Saquon. He's just a little cheaper, and it's just such a better situation. So this is a game I'm not looking to stack, but it's hard to not consider the Jaguars in a spread that's been moving with them. It opened early, and it shot up. They're almost a touchdown favorite at home. I think you can look to these Jags in some capacity. Minshew if you want to go against the grain, but this is a spot I actually am pretty interested in the home team.
All right. Are you interested in the home team, Alex? Right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Jags, lowest total on the slate. Doesn't always mean much, though. 40.5 points. Jags are 7-point favorites. 23.8 total, 16.8 for the Jets. By the way, Ben, I'll do this for you this week. I'm calling a Jets win here outright in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alex. Follow that up, fella.
Well, I think Fournette is one of the best fantasy players in the league, and the matchup today is pretty good versus a team that is pretty big underdog. And not the best as far as yards per attempt and rushing or passing, but the game flow should certainly benefit Fournette. His price has come up a little bit, but he's particularly cheap on FanDuel. So I like him the most there, but I'll have a lot across the board. And as far as wide receivers, I think that DJ Shark is he's getting a lot of hype, but I think the production is just unsustainable. The yards per target are just anomalously high, and that's not possible to sustain. So I'm projecting him to not be as good as some other guys, I think. And his price is pretty high, so I'm going to avoid him. Probably go to D.D. Westbrook if I have to pick a guy. D.D. was questionable, but he's expected to play, so that's good enough for me.
Okay. By the way, I'm with you here. If you actually take even a shallow dive into the numbers with Jacksonville, D.D. Westbrook on the season actually has 6 more targets than DJ Shark. Snap counts, you're seeing almost identical. 9 more for Shark on the season, 369 to 360. These guys are playing a ton of snaps. It's just that with Westbrook, he's running shallower routes and he's not seeing as many big play opportunities. But they both have Shark has 6 red zone targets. Westbrook has 5. So, if one of these guys is cheaper, or even if one of them is more popular, I have no problem going to the other here. I think it's a lot closer than it appears based on, just their production this season. So here's my thing, Ben. And I know I've said it a couple times throughout the week, but I actually have a decent amount of respect for this Jets defense for a couple of reasons. They've been put in just awful situations, whether it's from Luke Falk or Sam Darnold. They held Brady to 4 punts and an interception on consecutive drives last week after the Patriots scored those points to start the second quarter. The field position that they've been handed to defend is terrible, just outright terrible, and we've seen it almost every week. Right now, they rank 6th in run defense DVOA according to Football Outsiders, 17th, right middle of the league in passing defense. I think this is not a terrible defense, and the point totals against have been misleading. So that's the only reason I think Fournette, despite seeing a ton of work, and he's going to see a ton of work, and I still like Fournette, don't get me wrong, but I do think I won't have as much as I did last week. Any other thoughts for you on Jacksonville before we flip it to the Jets?
So it's tough because there's no disputing what you just said, but there's also I don't want to say no reason, but it easily could continue. Like Fournette could find a couple short fields and punch him in, and you look.
And he's going to get a ton of work. So
we know the work is going to be there. CJ Mosley also, I believe, is confirmed out. That is a big loss for the Jets defense. God, it's tricky. D.D. Westbrook was the guy who was one of my bright spots last week. He's someone that I think you could see it coming. And if he can start finding the end zone a little more, is going to be someone whose price is going to rise quickly. So not a good game to stack, in my opinion, but certainly one that you shouldn't just cross off the list either.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you. On the other side, what about Le'Veon Bell, Alex? We know that the workload should be there in a game that I think will be competitive, but he hasn't really been involved in the passing game much since Sam Darnold returned. Do you think that changes and they get him involved again?
Yeah, I think that might have just been a fluke a little bit. Obviously, disappointed a lot of guys. He was chalked that week, I think. But I think Darnold isn't the most mobile quarterback, so he'll have to check it down a decent amount. And Le'Veon Bell is probably at the cheapest price point he's been in years. So I think that even though the Jets aren't the greatest team in the world, that's pretty appealing.
Anybody you like here specifically?
Bell, and also if I had to go with one of the receivers, I think I'd go with Crowder. He's getting the most targets, at least in my projections, and the price tag looks affordable across the industry. So I might take a couple stabs there.
How about you, Ben?
Not much. We got to see Le'Veon lately, and I know it's a short couple weeks. He hasn't been getting the targets that I've expected. Now, maybe that's an outlier, and he'll return, but if the Jets are only going to be scoring, in the teens, he needs those targets to help mitigate the lack of TD upside unless he runs really pure. So that's my one concern with him, but the matchup should be fine. And if the Jets have any success, you would really have to think it would be at the hands of him.
Yeah, I think so too. I feel like this is a game, and honestly, I probably shouldn't even be saying this, but I feel like this is a game that has more scoring than initially expected. But at the same time, I don't really know how you can place any confidence in someone like Sam Darnold, the ghost seer, after last week. And look, that's a horrible matchup. I think you got to cut him some slack here. He was under pressure literally every single play. Don't get me wrong. He didn't do anything to absolve himself of any shame there. But I still, I think it could turn around a little bit today. And Jacksonville's defense, especially without Ramsey now, has not been that good. So we can move on. But are there anyone else for either of you guys on either side of this game? Make sure we touch on everything.
If Chris Herndon could ever return, that would be great. But once again, he is not.
Alex?
Sam Ficken in Showdown.
Yeah, that's the always.
You've got all the bases covered, let me tell you. All right. so we can move on here. We'll stick with you, Alex, and go to the Rams in Cincinnati. Okay, so talking about games that get us back on the path of interesting contests. The LA Rams right now have a 29.3 total, second highest behind only the Saints. They're 12-point favorites, which honestly I thought it'd be more. 46.5 total. Of course, the Cincinnati Bengals on this slate have one of the lowest totals themselves, 17.3. Let's start off with Todd Gurley. Can we get Todd Gurley back on track against the Bengals team that's allowed 200-plus rushing yards in 3 straight, ranks dead last in rushing defense in yards per attempt? They're allowing 29 more rushing yards per game than the next worst team, which is the Dolphins. The list goes on and on for how bad this Bengals defense has been. Can the line hold up for Gurley, clear some holes for him, and finally allow him to have that huge game we've been looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gurley is a great play in DFS. I mean, the Bengals have been terrible, and that always sets the ball for the running back. And Gurley has seen his price fall a little bit, pretty affordable across the industry, so that makes a nice play. But the one caveat I'd say is that his workload remains pretty stable week to week. He's not the kind of guy that will get like 20-plus rushes in the game anymore. I expect the extra workflow to go to Darryl Henderson.
Okay. Ben, do you think Gurley could get 20 carries here, or do you not think that's the case? He did see 18 last week against Atlanta. Do you think that's really the high end of what we could get out of Gurley?
I think it would take probably an outlier performance from Cincinnati where they push them for Gurley to eclipse 20 carries. This game isn't, for what it's worth, I don't think it makes a big difference. This game is in London. And that's all I have to say about that aspect of it. But you go back to Gurley. The one thing that's interesting, he's been terribly inefficient, but he's scoring, 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. That's what's been keeping him afloat. So I do kind of worry that he's got to keep that up in addition to being just straight better on the ground, because that's been what's really prevented some total floor games lately, and that is concerning.
It is concerning. I will say at the same time, just to play devil's advocate, if there was ever a chance to keep your 2 touchdowns rolling, it would be against Cincinnati.
Absolutely. That should be, if they want to get him in the end zone, they should be able to. And it's hard not to like the matchup. And I think this is one of those, I don't want to get too dramatic. If Gurley really can't produce here, you have to really ask if he belongs kind of in this price range going forward, because it doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah, I agree with you. How about the passing game? Some disappointment here in some good spots. Can we, and despite winning, of course, like last week, what do we get here against Cincinnati in London?
So, you can certainly look to these guys. I know a lot of people have mentioned, Robert Woods still has not found the end zone through the air, still getting a ton of work. We've got Kupp, who's emerged as the number 1 target. And then you have Cooks, who's more, he's cheaper, but he's more of that, I guess, home run threat. You can look at these guys with Goff. He bounced back after that horrendous game against the Niners. But it's more just, how do you want to attack this Cincinnati defense? You can do it in any number of ways. I pretty much have interest across the board with the Rams this week.
Okay. What about passing game for you, Alex?
I think they're pretty appealing. I mean, 3 guys for the Rams that are fairly productive in the passing game. And although they probably will not get pushed to have to pass the ball a lot, it's not outside the realm of possibility. And actually, I really like some of the plays on Cincinnati and DFS. So I think you could make a sneaky game stack out of this one.
Okay. What about the other side, Alex, getting into it a little bit here for Cincinnati? It's been just treacherous. It's been awful for the Bengals all season long. Manny and I discussed it on yesterday's show on Sirius. Like, if there's someone decent on the waiver, you could legitimately make a very good argument for dropping Joe Mixon. That's how bad he's been. That's how bad this line has been. Ben, I see you shaking your head. I'm with you. It's sad.
It's a sad day.
It's a sad season.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts here? Are you willing to roll the dice on, say, Tyler Boyd, who's likely going to get a lot of Jalen Ramsey, Auden Tate? Do you think Alex Erickson can keep the flame burning this week? I mean, what are we doing here with Cincinnati?
I like Cincinnati a lot because they haven't been good all season, but the volume is there. I mean, they're averaging a little bit less than 7 yards per pass, but they're passing a ton. I mean, at one of the highest rates in the league, 2/3 of the time almost. And that should equal a lot of opportunities for Dalton and a lot of yardage for the 3 wide receivers, Erickson, Tate, and Boyd, who has the big game this week. It's pretty hard to pin down, but I like all 3 of those guys.
Okay. Ben, what about you?
This is, definitely against the grain, but in terms of when you talk about stacks, one of the things to consider is the total cumulative salary, and the Bengals are one of the cheaper 3-man stacks you can get. We know that Dalton is going to be most likely playing from behind, and even in bad games, he's gotten there, certainly with garbage time, but there's no reason he wouldn't have garbage time here if it goes according to plan. So you have guys like Boyd, who I don't know if Ramsey will shadow him. I'll be honest. I think he'll see a lot of him. I don't know if it's going to be a straight shadow. And then you have Tate and Erickson. Lofty, you're the one who told me this last week. I was wondering why Tyler Boyd had zero everything, and Erickson had 100% of the passing at one point.
At one point, Dalton had 6 completions for 110 yards. Alex Erickson had 6 receptions for 110 yards, like midway through the 3rd quarter.
That's good. Really great. So we have that to work with. These guys are really cheap. So although, you may not get a slate breaking in terms of getting there with your stack, there's a lot, lower margin of error. And then you can pay up for top end skill positions around the game. So I will have some Cincinnati exposure, both in running it back with Rams and with starting with Dalton and a couple of these pass catchers.
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask. Both of you guys can answer this. Ben, quickly, you first, and then Alex. Are you looking to run it back? I guess you just answered it, but I was going to say, are you looking to run it back, just with a pass catcher or so, or are you willing to actually run Dalton out there with a Bengals stack for the receivers?
I'm willing to do both just because of the difference in salary. If you run back with a Bengal, certainly, running like Goff, Gurley, Kupp is it's expensive and it's a very viable stack. If you run Dalton and a couple of these pass catchers and run it back with a Ram, you have a lot more salary to play with, and those are interesting lineups.
Alex, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're projecting Dalton for under 1% ownership, and I certainly don't love the idea of stacking him up, but I'll be damned if he has a huge game this week and we can pay him.
All right, there you have it. By the way, I wanted to point out there were some comments that made perfect sense in the YouTube chat, saying basically that Gurley relies on touchdowns that hit value. We can't predict that. Fournette has the volume, which we can predict. Yeah, no question. But also keep in mind the ownership gap right now is pretty significant, and Gurley's projected for less than half of the ownership on Fournette. So in cash games, the decision is obvious. I do think in tournaments you could very much make an argument for Todd Gurley. I don't think he's look, does he rely on touchdowns? He has been, sure, but he also hasn't faced the Bengals. So just something to keep in mind here. Let's talk about the next one, boys. We're halfway through it, making decent time. New Orleans Saints, Arizona Cardinals. So here's the news we got, Alex. We know that Drew Brees will play. Alvin Kamara, however, and I figured yesterday when they announced that Brees was going to play and they didn't say anything on Kamara that he probably wouldn't be active. Well, now we got news early this morning that he's not expected to play, dealing with that ankle injury. It's not a big surprise, too, because forget about getting news at a certain point or whatnot. They're 12.5-point favorites at home, right? I mean, their defense has been spectacular. The Cardinals have an 18-point total. The Saints have a 30.5 total, which is the highest on the slate. It's no surprise to see that Kamara is likely not going to play and isn't needed. But what about Latavius Murray now at this price point that we're getting him? Very reasonable price point across the board.
Yeah, I mean, Latavius Murray is probably the top play in fantasy this week because last week we saw him go out, have more. I think he had like 29 rushing attempts or something crazy. I was expecting maybe Dwayne Washington, Zach Zenner to go in the game, get some of that excess workload, but they didn't. course, maybe that's more likely when they're facing a weaker team this week. But the most likely thing is Latavius Murray goes out and he gets a lot of work. And at that price point in a great matchup, that's the smash play.
Ben?
Hard to not like them. They seem, and I don't know if this is the case, but it seems like they know Kamara is going to be doing the heavy lifting, and they don't mind giving Murray all the work now because he's going to, be relegated soon enough to that complementary back. So you can't, when you're getting that type of volume for this type of price, it is chalk that you have to buy into in some capacity.
So here's a question I have for you, and you can tie this in, of course, to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas individually. Are you willing to play Michael Thomas and Latavius Murray in the same lineup without Drew Brees? Because I don't think it's a crazy idea at all, just based on how much of this offense has flowed through either whoever's in the backfield and Michael Thomas. But what are your thoughts on it?
So it's funny. I had this exact thought right before we went on, and I'm glad this came up because I want to hear both your thoughts on it.
I only have hard-hitting questions here on the Deeper Dive.
That's what we do around here. You definitely can do it. Let's get that out of the way. There are certainly paths to do it. In cash-like games or smaller fields, I think it's much more applicable just because, it's not the perfect correlation. In tournaments that are large field GPPs, I'm going to shy away from it. I just don't see it hitting the ceiling without Brees in there. So you can get away with it, and in smaller fields, there is absolutely no problem with doing that.
Okay, Alex, same question to you. I think it's an important one for this slate where, two of these guys are the highest projected and probably two of the most popular, highest owned players as well.
Yeah, I think that whenever you got kind of chalk that's super popular, you can't get that much of an edge by going to it. It's usually the other players because, since so many people have them, it doesn't really help you win the tournament that easily. But this is definitely good chalk with Michael Thomas and Latavius Murray. And I don't mind having them in the same lineup because Latavius Murray gets it done on the ground. So if both of them have a big game, it's not necessarily a requirement. Drew Brees really lights it up. And I really love Michael Thomas this week. With no Jared Cook, no Alvin Kamara. That just means he's going to get even more targets than normal, and he's already getting a ton.
For sure. And that's kind of the thing. I'm very interested in Thomas, as many people are, and Murray, as everybody is, but not that interested in Drew Brees.
I don't hate Drew Brees. I think another really popular play is Ted Ginn. He's kind of that cheap wide receiver dart I've heard people talk a lot about. And if you have Thomas and Ted Ginn, then maybe Brees becomes a good option.
Okay. What about the other side, Alex, with this Arizona team? The whole David Johnson debacle frustrated a lot of people last week. He isn't expected to play today, so at least Cliff Kingsbury isn't going to put him in for the first 2 snaps and pull him. And Chase Edmunds will will be the guy again. But his price has come up. This matchup is worlds different than the Giants matchup he faced last week. Is there anything you like with this Arizona team today?
Yeah, I think that Chase Edmunds would be the guy to go to if you're going to anyone. There are some ways this could go horribly wrong. As you mentioned, them being a huge dog, maybe he doesn't get a lot of rushing attempts. And also because they signed Alfred Morris, so the situation is different this week where he has a backup. Last week he did not, so that could equal a little bit lower workload.
Ben, what about you with Arizona here? Of course, they've been dealing with injuries to David Johnson. Christian Kirk, game time decision, but we've seen this before. He still hasn't seen a full practice since that injury. Until he does, I'm going to assume, or until further note, I'm just going to assume that he's not playing. What are your thoughts on Arizona here?
It's hard to really like much. I will say that Kyler Murray was surging up, and he kind of peaked last week and let everybody down. And now what's happened? He went down the other side of the mountain, and nobody is going to be on him. It's a tough spot. There's no doubt about that. But there is a real situation where I could see him having a big volume type game where he's running all over the place. They're trailing. The Saints have it in gear, and he ends up having a really big performance. The problem is I would probably run him alone and hope that his rushing upside is what carries you, because I have no interest really in any of the skill position players for the Cardinals.
Okay. Neither do I. I think there's other places we can get to. Ben, staying with you, Tennessee and Tampa Bay. This game to me is a little bit more appealing on some levels that it may be to the public. 45 and a half over under between these two teams. Titans 24-point total, 21 and a half for Tampa Bay on the road. They're 2-point dogs here in Tennessee. But Ryan Tannehill, it looked like, from what I saw, now I didn't watch the entire game. I don't know how you could. Actually, no, you know what? I'm sorry. I did watch almost the entirety of that game because it was a 4 p.m. game. Mike Vrabel looked like he really got Ryan Tannehill comfortable in this offense. And Derrick Henry being able to break off, 5, 6, 7 yards at a time was really helpful against the Chargers, even though he didn't break loose. There's two ways I see it. Tampa Bay ranks number 1 in run defense this season. They've been fantastic. Their run D is legitimately great. They might be the biggest pass funnel defense in the league this year, right? They're allowing the most passing yards per game. Football Outsiders has them, of course, ranked towards the bottom. And really, on all fronts, they've been terrible there. Do you think that we see this funneled straight to the pass again, where Derrick Henry can't get anything going and they start throwing more? Because my assumption is that Tennessee's defense is just good enough to where they'll keep running Derrick Henry no matter what, and he'll still probably get 18, 20 carries, but they should have success through the air, at least more than they would on the ground. What are your thoughts on Tannehill and Corey Davis and A.J. Brown today?
So this is probably the game that'll define my slate. I really like this game. I think it's one of my favorite games to stack because I agree with you. In certain situations, this game I think could be pretty ugly, that the Titans continue to run Derrick Henry and they get by leaning on the defense, and they're able to do that even though it's not going to work. But I think there's also a lot of scenarios where they go to Tannehill and it opens up, and him to these receivers is very viable. And then on the other side, we know the Bucs they're always a great team to have stack and running it back with just because of the way they play. We've seen Godwin and Mike Evans have terrible games and monster games. So I think this is a spot for me. I'm going to buy into the Titans passing attack. I really, as much as I'm a Mariota guy, there's no doubting that Tannehill, he unlocked something with these receivers. I know it was only 1 week, but you could see this offense is that much more dynamic and they're more balanced with Tannehill under center.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely think they'll struggle to move the ball on the ground. Everything we've seen out of Tampa Bay's run defense suggests that they've been very, very good. Alex, how about you on this game?
I like this game a lot too. I'd probably go the other way and go with Derrick Henry. I think that from the Tennessee side at least, I think that he just has the volume, and he's the kind of guy that will go out and get you 20-plus runs if Tennessee wins this game and they're favored to win. So I think he makes a nice play. I think maybe he'll even get some more targets out of the backfield with Tannehill because Marcus Mariota is the better rusher of the two.
Okay. Yeah, I worry about this spot, but I guess we'll see how it turns out. There's actually another running back in that same price tier that's very risky, but we'll get there later. I think I have some interest in him a little bit more than Henry. Alex, what about the opposite side for Tampa Bay with guys like Winston and Godwin, who's having a huge season, and Mike Evans, who when he does show up, he shows up in a big way. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I love the Tampa Bay side. I mean, they're always amazing for fantasy, but because of the amount they throw the ball. This game, O.J. Howard is out, so Cameron Brate opens up as maybe a value play, but I'm not projecting him to be that good, and just because he doesn't get targeted at a high rate when he runs routes. I expect that Mike Evans and Godwin will get a little bit of a bump from Howard being out. And if you stack all three of them, Winston, Evans, Godwin, or maybe you just pick your favorite of the two, that makes a really high upside stack.
Okay. Hey, Ben, Delaney Walker's out for the Titans. I don't think we mentioned that. Any thoughts here on Jonnu Smith?
Oh, yeah. I was like, hopefully this is the game. And then I can say I was legitimately like 4 years early on this guy. I was trying to play this guy. It did not work. Both tight ends are somewhat interesting if you want to pay down with Brate or Jonnu. And he's an athletic guy. We've seen him have some success. I worry a little about his ownership. It's not going to be sky high, but it's also not going to be non-existent.
Right.
And I think people are going to look, they see the game log, they see, Tannehill, and he slides in nicely at a pretty weak tight end position. So it's not ideal, but if I'm really over on this game, so of course I'm going to have some exposure to the tight ends.
All right. I can see it. I mean, I remember those days playing Jonnu Smith where you'd run him out there and he'd have 0 targets for 0 receptions and 0 yards. Yeah, definitely remember that. But I don't think it's a crazy idea here. One of the other reasons, too, is that, we hear a lot about how Arizona's been incapable of stopping tight ends. Well, if you just look at Tampa Bay, man, forget about the tight end position, which they rank 31st in terms of yards and receptions. And I think they've allowed the most passing targets to tight ends. But, Ben, it's just such a bad pass defense altogether that the opportunities, even if they're limited, should still be good opportunities to Jonnu Smith. So it's not crazy.
No. I think that sums it up nicely, and that's really my mindset of this game.
Okay. How about we move on, unless you have anything else, Alex?
Yeah, I think these tight ends might be a little bit overvalued by the public just because of there's this mentality where if a guy's injured, you pick the backup, but these guys aren't very targeted when they're on the field. So stay away from it if possible.
Okay. Denver and Indianapolis. No more Emmanuel Sanders, and Cortland Sutton should take over as the top dog in this wide receiver corps for the Denver Broncos. Right now, this game, not expected to see a ton of scoring, Alex. We got a 42 over-under. The Colts are 5-point home favorites with a 23.5 total, 18.5 for Denver. Start with the road team. Let's talk about the Denver Broncos going into Indianapolis without Emmanuel Sanders, who's now with the 49ers, and a sub-20-point total here. Thoughts on Cortland Sutton? It's a big topic of conversation for today's slate.
Yeah, you gotta love Cortland Sutton because the guy replacing Emmanuel Sanders, Fred Brown, and possibly Deontay Spencer, these guys aren't going to see as many targets as Sanders, so that means Sutton should get a little bit more work, and that adds up to a pretty nice fantasy potential.
Okay. What about you, Ben? For Cortland Sutton, does he stand out to you as a decent option here, or do you think it's a little overhyped?
Probably both, honestly. But I'm a big Cortland Sutton guy. It's a guy that, he's very athletic, can get red zone shots. Flacco should be forced to look at him. You have him, you have Deshaun Hamilton, who he's kind of in that Erickson bucket if you really need a cheapie, but I don't think there's a ton of reason to go there unless you're stacking the game or you really need the salary savings. So Sutton is someone he really should have the opportunities. It's not an ideal matchup, but it's not a terrible one either. So I'm more than willing to kind of plug him in where it feels applicable.
Are you taking stabs at anyone else in this offense?
So Noah Fant is someone that I've kind of kept an eye on, but with other cheap tight ends, I don't think I'm going to end up getting there. The running back situation, they're both it's tough because they both have work and they both really do contribute to the offense. So I'm not sure I get to Lindsey or Freeman. I will say on the other side, Marlon Mack is someone I do have interest in.
Okay. Alex, we will get to the Colts, but is there anyone else on this Denver team that stands out?
I'm not really into Royce Freeman or Philip Lindsay because their prices have kind of gone up and it's not the most appealing spot for running backs.
How about the Colts?
I kind of like the Mac call. I think he's pretty reasonably priced across the industry. And T.Y. Hilton, I mean, any week he could kind of blow up the slate. And I'm keeping an eye on Jack Doyle's injury status because if he's out, then Ebron could be a nice play.
Okay, Ben, you just mentioned Mac. Talk to me about him in this home spot.
So I think there's a couple of things. It's far from it's not an ideal matchup, but it's not something I worry about either. He got the work last week. It didn't materialize into points. And I think the big thing for me is he's right in the Latavius Murray black hole.
Right.
He is absorbing all the ownership. So if you can one-off there, it's just natural leverage. And Marlon Mack is a guy, when you're seeing that kind of work, T.Y. Hilton, definitely viable, but he probably draws tough coverage. And if someone like Doyle is out, there's just limited options. So I do think the Colts are going to give him every opportunity to win this game on the ground at a reasonable price tag at low ownership. I have interest.
This Latavius Murray ownership is going to be outrageously high.
He might be in smaller fields, higher stakes. I could see him, 50+% easily.
Yeah. It would not surprise me whatsoever. Alex, is there anything else here?
Oh, no, I'm not really looking at this game that much.
All right, Ben, anything we missed?
No, not really. Colts defense, I took a strong look at them, just because Flacco's a statue. But again, there's so many defenses you can look to in certain situations.
Okay. Let's talk about San Francisco, Carolina with you here, Ben. I don't expect to see much scoring in this one either. You've got right now a lot of games with pretty low totals. This is one of them, 42 points 43 points. I don't know what to make of this game. It's just not one that feels. Actually, no. You know what? I'm sorry. The over under on this is 41 points. San Francisco 23-point implied total, 5-point favorites here. And I know you got Manny Sanders now, but are they just going to look to go run heavy? Two very good defenses on both sides. What about this game, if anything, appeals to you? Could it be Kittle or anything?
Yeah, so it's tough because I do think people will make the mistake. You have to throw out last week's game completely. It was played in an actual monsoon.
Oh, it's horrible.
So there's nothing, you're not going to see stats from anyone, and that's fine. Kittle is someone we know can explode, and at a weak tight end position, I think he is an interesting guy, but I'm not going to try to decipher the wide receivers here for the Niners. I think there's too many bodies. We've added in another one, and they want to control the game on the ground and with the defense. So not a team, although they're a fantastic team, I don't think they're a great target on most weeks for daily.
All right. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I'd probably go to Kittle here, if anyone. I think that Emmanuel Sanders coming in just kind of muddies the waters a little bit for everyone. And none of them were that appealing to begin with. Sanders himself, maybe I'll play in a few weeks, but I'm going to wait till he learns the playbook because usually wide receivers don't come in and play the whole game.
So is that pretty much where you're at on this game entirely? Is there anything else here?
I mean, I don't mind Carolina's side. A tough matchup versus San Francisco. But McCaffrey, he can rack up points doing any number of things, even if it's just catching a bunch of short balls. And DJ Moore is someone I'm looking to as a contrarian play because pretty effective when he gets targets, and they should have to throw a ball here a decent amount.
Okay. Ben, do you want to talk about anything from the Carolina side?
I expect them to hang in this game coming off the bye. To me, this is a game where McCaffrey is going to need, and I mean, he's the king of this. He's really going to need passing volume to get there, in my opinion. It's going to be really tough. The Niners have basically been invincible against, running backs trying to rush it in. I don't think that changes much this week. So for McCaffrey to get there, you're going to need, I think, 10+ targets. And that is something that we've seen, especially in tough games from them.
All right. Fantasy Draft, sponsor of the Deeper Dive, is the only rake-free daily fantasy site, and they're bringing that heat again with the $350,000 guaranteed rake-free contest, the Hooters main event. The largest and only rake-free contest of its kind you'll find for Week 8. Remember, only on Fantasy Draft are your 100% of entries paid to the contest winners. What you pay in gets paid back out, all of it to you as the player. Sign up at fantasydraft.com with the referral code AWESEMO, AWESEMO. You get a 7-day free trial membership. Go ahead and head over there. AWESEMO, AWESEMO. Get a free 7-day trial membership and hop in that Hooters main event. Rake-free, $350,000 guaranteed contest. Largest rake-free contest you're going to find anywhere in Week 8 and probably this season. That is fantasydraft.com, the sponsor of the NFL Deeper Dive. All right, fellas, 2 to go here. Ben, we're actually moving quicker than I thought because so many of these games are just dead spots.
God awful. That's what happens when you move with bad weather and some of these teams, it kind of takes shape. I'm not surprised to see that, to be honest.
This next one, a little bit different. Houston and Oakland. From an over/under standpoint, this is the highest on the slate, 51.5. The Houston Texans have a 28.8 implied total here. That's tied with the Seahawks for the third highest on Sunday's main slate. Of course, they're 6-point favorites at home. So let's start with Houston here. No Will Fuller, of course. I will point out on the other side of this game, Tyrell Williams is expected to return from a 3-week hiatus. He should be back in the offense for Oakland. But starting with Houston here, man, it's hard to get away from Watson and Stills and Hopkins in a game like this. What are you doing with them?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, it's hard. I really like them, but I think they're going to be, I'd say, easily the most popular stack. So it's something I just want to be really cognizant. If I do start with those type of guys, don't run them back with the obvious cheap guys, because if you plug them in, you plug in Latavius, you and 100,000 of your friends are going to be right up there vying for the leader. So I don't think that's the move, but it is hard not to have interest. And we saw what Rodgers did last week against this Raiders team. Texans need this game at home, so I definitely am looking to get exposure to them. I just am trying to structure it differently than everyone else who's trying to do it.
Okay. And how would that be?
So I think someone like Marlon Mack, maybe not using Lat Murray or combining there, and then maybe, again, just trying to be unique with how I structure. Do I really try to jam in a couple guys and pay down at a certain position, or depending on who I run back? I think most people are going to run it back with Waller. Maybe I take a stab at Tyrell Williams, even though he has been hurt trying to get over the top on this defense.
He has. It's certainly, though, a Houston secondary that has been banged up, or not banged up, but has given up some big plays this season. Actually, both of these teams are allowing top 5 yards per game in the passing game. So look, that's only one stat, of course, but look, sometimes that matters. And Houston's allowed 15 passing touchdowns, Oakland 16 passing touchdowns, both of those in the top 5 as well. I mean, Alex, when you look at both of these defenses in terms of their ability to stop the passing game, it's very possible that we see a shootout here today in Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's why this game is so popular, is because we got a lot of good options. Stills is probably my favorite option of anyone, because I'm expecting him to get a larger workload with Will Fuller out, and he's not priced up for that. Been terrific this year when he's been on the field. And then on Oakland, we got Tyrell Williams back, and that makes me not like Darren Waller quite as much. But I still think he's a great play. But he kind of falls under the same camp as DJ Shark, where his numbers this year have just been a little bit out of the ordinary, and I'm expecting he's not quite as good as Helix, but still very good.
All right. So, Ben, is it Waller for you? Is it Williams? Is it Derek Carr maybe for Oakland? And run it back with a Stills or a Hopkins? Talk to me about Oakland for a minute here.
I think Carr is somewhat interesting. I think for me personally, Dalton actually took a lot of those shares. If you're playing 150, which I am not, I think you could certainly work them in, because this game, as you guys talked about, there's going to be potential for fireworks across it. It's not just a Houston onslaught. The Raiders have some abilities to rack up points. Waller's got to be the prudent play, but at the same time, I think everybody sees that. He's been getting consistent work. He's been on the field. He's coming off a huge game, whereas Tyrell Williams is coming off an injury, and Josh Jacobs is banged up. So, again, it's more about you got to structure your team as one unit. If you want to use Waller, that's totally fine, and it makes sense, but you can't use him with all the other obvious guys and expect to get away with it.
Okay. Alex, talk to me about anything else from this game. I don't want to miss anything here just because it is going to be the most popular spot of the week.
I think the running backs are pretty reasonable, Josh Jacobs and Hyde. The prices aren't extremely appealing, but it could be a kind of contrarian take on it, because everyone's going to the receivers in this game.
Okay. We've got one more game to go before we do. Awesemo.com/join is where you go to get 50% off your first month. A premium Awesemo Plus membership. You don't want to miss it. Just use the sign-up code DEEPERDIVE, all one word, DEEPERDIVE. Get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus membership. Includes our player projections, ownership projections, the top stack tools, all of the NBA content that we've been churning out over the past week. And of course, if these sites run contests for a sport, we've got content for that sport. So it's a one-stop shop for everything DFS. And when you go to the landing page, awesemo.com/join, you click begin membership. We ask you a question: what type of player are you? Hobbyist, professional, serious? So we can cater your subscription to your needs. So you're not getting too little and you're not getting too much. All of that at awesemo.com/join. Use that sign-up code DEEPERDIVE, one word, to get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus. All right, fellas, let's close it out. Ben, New England and Cleveland. I know it's stupid, and you can tell me. But, man, I have some interest in Nick Chubb today. I get it. It's dumb. But I feel like the Patriots' run defense has at least been the least strongest aspect of this D. Maybe the game gets so out of hand early on that Nick Chubb doesn't have an opportunity, but they've used him in games where they're playing from behind. They continue to run him. His ownership right now, or at least last I looked, let me pull this up because this makes a big difference for me. Nick Chubb coming in around 6%. Yeah, that probably won't serve me well, but I'm going to him a little bit here. What are your thoughts on Cleveland in a game where they're massive dogs right now? They are, where is it? 11-point dogs on the road, 16.3 implied total. It's ugly. 43 over under. Go ahead, Ben.
It was 13 a couple of days ago. That's all I'll say. Dropping. We'll save. Right?
Are you with Jarvis Landry on this one? You're going to go in there and win?
I'll tell you this. They are 2-4 going into New England. They need this game. I'm not saying that's, you need it, you get it. It doesn't work like that. They're coming off a bye. They should test them. I really do think that the Patriots defense, to me, is the most overrated aspect of this NFL season. They've played absolutely nobody. The one non-overrated part is Gilmore. I think he takes away Odell, and it sets it up for Nick Chubb, for Landry, and Baker has to find a way to not turn the ball over. From a fantasy perspective, having said all that nonsense, Chubb is the guy that I'm interested in. The price is reasonable. He should get work in the passing attack if they're trailing. If they are winning, he has to get the volume. So I'm going to lean with him. Certainly you don't need a ton to get over, which is nice. Don't have to allocate, my whole portfolio to him. But in sloppy weather, which we are expected to see up in Boston, I think this is a lower scoring type game where maybe a play or two could be against the grain.
I hate to say I agree with you. How about you, Alex?
I think I feel like your take on Chubb. I think that he could be a nice fantasy play. I am interested in the New England side as well. Josh Gordon being sent to the IR opens up a little bit of opportunity because he was a higher target guy than the guys he's being replaced with, which will be some combination of Jacoby Myers and Mohamed Sanu probably. So I think that Edelman makes a nice play. James White, I'm pretty interested in. Maybe even I see Ben Watson's price is a little bit higher than I like, but he's probably going to get all the tight end work. So there's some fantasy value on the New England side here.
Okay. Ben, what about the New England side for you? I know that James White, according to our projections, let me make sure it's there. Yeah, has a pretty solid projecting him for over 16 DraftKings points today against the Cleveland Browns. What you're thinking here on this backfield with White, and then, of course, somebody in Sonny Michel who, you want to say Todd Gurley's touchdown dependent. He will get more touchdowns than this year.
Yeah, he's a tough one to gauge, but James White is someone that I have interest in. Again, how I'm approaching this game, I think it's going to be close, competitive, lower scoring, and that suits James White, honestly. He could get 12 catches for 35 yards, and you think, he did nothing. It adds up very quickly. Just the way they utilize him, I think in games that are more competitive, they will lean on him a little more. They haven't had to I mean, they've just dominated everybody. But again, I'll run through it real quick. We got the Steelers, the Jets twice, the Bills, the Dolphins, the Redskins, the Giants. That's the list. I mean, Cleveland's better than those teams. I'm not saying Cleveland's great, but tougher tests loom for this defense. So we will see what they are made of. And I think if it is a tight game, guys like Edelman and White, who are the known commodities, will take the volume.
Who are your favorite plays from New England, Alex?
White and Edelman.
Who and Edelman?
White.
I think that I was just looking at his game log because 16. I mean, it's my projections, so I gotta make sure that this is on point here. So what I'm seeing, man, is like this is a really weird game log. He's gotten between 11 and 13 points every single week so far.
Yeah, no variance. Crazy.
I know. So I mean, that's pretty unusual for football. I do like this game in particular because it was a little bit more competitive, and I feel like he's probably the best as far as Patriots offense of all the backs. So if they need to play to put up points, he should be on the field a lot.
Okay. I want to back up for just a second since we're about done here, fellas. I don't think we spent enough time on McCaffrey, so let's just both of you cover this one more time. It's a pretty important spot. He's very expensive, right? You know, if you're getting the McCaffrey, you're paying a premium for him across the board. He's 92 on DraftKings, 96 on FanDuel. Just the question I have for you here, Ben, I'll go with you first, is from an ownership standpoint, McCaffrey is, coming in around 12%. Do you think for a guy at his talent level, despite the matchup, that is too low?
I do. So I think it's somewhat interesting. Last time we saw McCaffrey on the main slate, he broke it severely against Jacksonville. Then they went to London, and he quietly had a fine game. Then they were on a bye. And after the Jacksonville game, the narrative was you have to play 100% Christian McCaffrey, basically. You can't not play him. And it's amazing what 2 weeks has done to that, where now we're getting him in low teens possibly. And I know it's a tough matchup, but this is a guy that has just been unbelievable. He doesn't come off the field and he gets the work. So even in a tough matchup like that, I have to have exposure just because his volume alone can get him there. And with so many cheap options, it's hard to ignore.
All right. Same question for you on McCaffrey, Alex.
I've learned that this the hard way. McCaffrey is the kind of guy when you fade him, he can go out and get 50 points and your day's done. And I mean, it's probably not that likely today that he has an exceptional production, but I think that it's probably more than the 15% he's owned. So I'm going to take some shots.
Okay. Let's go before we head out. If there's anything else we haven't touched on here, we've got 12 games. We've got only 3 4 p.m. games. And then most of the injury news that is still pending should be breaking pretty soon. And by the way, next week, we've got something pretty exciting for you. In the intermission between this show and Live Before Lock, we're going to bring on 2 of our guys and have them break down for a bit of an intermission show, 25 minutes or so, break down all of the injuries as the reports roll in at 11:30, give you all of the updates there and the implications heading into the week for 1 p.m. lock. But of course, we've got Live Before Lock coming up after us today, and they're going to take you up till that 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's as it always is. It's Spags, and it's going to be Josh Engelman. And that's all I've got for you. Of course, we've got the Showdown slate and that show tonight leading up to 8:20 lock. But Alex, final thoughts. And sorry. If you enjoyed the show, as always, hit us with a thumbs up, like that video. It's greatly appreciated, and it helps us continue to put out free content. I say it a lot, but it's true. At youtube.com/awesemo. Also, subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. What do you have to say, Alex, before we get out?
I think this should be a really good slate. I'm seeing some really great opportunities to kind of get leverage on the field. we've kind of gone over a few of them, but a couple I like are the Rams and Bucks. I'm ending up with a lot of those in my lineups. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks for Fantasy Draft for sponsoring the show. I'm always enjoying playing their main event, winning more money when I cash than any other site, so that's pretty nice, and that gives me a little bit more budget to spend on some wings, from Hooters.
All right. Hey, Jazz Raz, in Blu-ray Vision, take us out.
That's right. Crisp as can be. I think what you got to do, decide what you want to do with these Saints, and with each and every lineup, you got Lat, you got Michael Thomas. Structure around what you want to do with them and then build accordingly. If you fade both of them, you can build a lot more vanilla. If you have both of them, you want to be cognizant of the massive ownership that you're bringing in. And other than that, I really do enjoy the slate. One of my favorites so far this year. So thanks everyone for watching. Good luck. We will see you next week.
All right. There it is. Talk to you soon. It's been the NFL Deeper Dive. Stick around shortly. Live Before Lock coming up. Chris Bags, Josh Engelman. Good luck today.